and it froze. Shit. All right, welcome. Yeah, hold on. Okay, I think it's working now. Welcome to the Refined Strength podcast. I am joined by Joe Sheehey, owner of Cured Nutrition. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Rachel. Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on and talk about Cured and just the how it came to be, because you started back in 2018, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that you've been part of the whole journey. You've seen like the whole journey. I know you've used the product since the very beginning. So you've seen the whole evolution. It was right around the time of the Olympia. Yeah, Olympia 2017 was the first time I was literally walking around the Olympia Expo handing out samples of one of our first products. We used to have seasonings for food with CBD in it.
Yeah.
And I literally walked around the whole Olympia handing those out. And I was like, reflecting back on it afterwards, I was like, that was the sketchiest thing ever. Like, what was I doing? But that's where the company started. And September 19th, 2017 was when we did our first day of sales. And now we're here 2025. I was going to say 2024. But a little over 7 years later, and the company's evolved a lot, but the mission has stayed the same.
Yeah. So what is that mission? Talk more about how you came to that and how it's evolved.
Yeah, I mean, what I realized is that I think a lot of people that come to the health and fitness industry come to the health and fitness industry for one reason, and then it ends up evolving. And for me, I started competing back in 2013, 2014. And honestly, I was just trying to move through some demons, move through darkness. And the gym was a great place for me to escape and move through pain. And then what happened for me was several years into competing, I recognized that it became disordered for me. So what started as something that was very mentally and physically healthy, helping me move through a difficult time of my life and really like redefine health for myself, turned into something that almost became a trap for me. And what I've realized, and I continue to see it, but I saw it back in 2016 and 2017, and that was the reason that the company started, was that there's just this evolution of what health really is and what health really means. And Cured has been on the forefront of products that you use for your overall health and wellness. And why I say forefront is because cannabinoids specifically, but mushrooms and kind of traditional herbalism carries a stigma that shouldn't necessarily be there, but it's because of a misunderstanding of what the cannabis plant can do, what mushrooms can do for you. And so there's like this leading edge of health and wellness. And what I realized for me was that was the next step. I went from living in the world of supplements that were making me want to run through a wall to creating supplements that, and that's not bad. Like sometimes you need that in the gym, but moving into what does it really mean to be like, what's true health and what are like the pillars that we really need to focus on. And for us at Cured, it's reducing stress, getting sleep, and then really being able to help our overall mental clarity, which supports our pursuits in life. And so if we keep it very simple, how do we stress less? How do we sleep more? And how do we pursue our dreams more? That's what Cured is really focused on. And we do that through forward thinking supplements. And so you wouldn't think that cannabis supplements would be that mission, but we've realized that if you rebrand products and industries that tend to have a stigma around them, if you rebrand them the correct way, then you help change people's perspective, and then you can redefine health in that entire mission. And that's what Cured's really tried to do. Is we take a traditional herbalism approach to products, and it sticks out like a sore thumb in the health and wellness industry, specifically bodybuilding industry. And we've just been committed to being that example of what is true health, and how can you start to think about things that have carried stigmas for far too long in a different way and use them for your overall health. So that's what we're here to do.
Yeah, I love that. And that's a big part of why I've been such a big fan of Cured for a long time, and why like I love being a partner of you guys too, is as a bodybuilding coach and as a competitor too. It's like I've learned a lot throughout the years. I've been competing now, like my first show is in 2015. And so
Yeah.
I've learned a lot too, like coming also from the days of like, oh yeah, I'll try this supplement that also makes me run through a brick wall. Um, and and that you think that that's just like the way it's supposed to be, and it, like you said, nothing wrong with that, but stress management is just so incredibly important, and sleep is like one of the most anabolic agents there is when it comes to bodybuilding, because of
Right.
its recovery benefits and just everything that sleep allows our bodies to do. And so if you can have something that helps you do those things better, then like you're unstoppable, honestly. And I've seen that in myself and my own clients. And it's been cool to watch the industry too change along with that, and how you guys, I agree, you're at the forefront of that, because um you know, your that's your value, that's been your value from the very beginning. And from an educational and like coaching standpoint, that's been a big shift over the years, in terms of like coaches are more educated now than they were 10 years ago, and
Oh
they
yeah.
are doing so much more than like just sending a meal plan out and here's your cardio and here are the drugs you want to take and here are the supplements you want to take. It's like we have big data sheets, and we're tracking things like stress management, stress levels, and sleep hours, sleep quality. Like that's the things we're talking about in order to stay ahead of the curve as coaches too.
100%. I mean, when I used to compete, it's wild to think about this because some of it was pretty
Right.
messed up. But um, when I used to compete, you know, you think about even going into a show and getting very close to stepping on the stage, and what happens for a lot of people. I'll just speak for myself because this was my own experience. I don't want to say this as a blanket term, but a blanket statement. But I used a lot of diuretics going into competitions. And if I look back on it now, what if I was just sleeping more? Could I have dropped the water weight? What if I was just stressing less? Could I have dropped the water weight? So it's just like, you know, there are multiple ways to get to a outcome, but what's the most sustainable and long-term um, healthy way to do it? And that's like, it takes time to get there. We all go through our own evolution, but the reason why we try to focus on those three pillars is just kind of simplifying what overall health and wellness is. And whether you're on a, you know, a transformation journey, you're trying to lose weight for the very first time, or you're trying to step on stage, like those pillars will always be true. You have to
Yeah.
sleep. You have to focus on your stress and what's going on with your cortisol. And if you can do those things, then of course, like if you got those covered and you're nailing your meals, you're nailing your training, you're doing a lot of other things, like then you can move the needle even further with other tools, other supplements, other like biohacking regimens. Of course, like there's a way to go much further, but that foundation, it's like saying if you just focus on like the 20% that's producing 80% of your results, you can get so far. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do is simplify it.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell people like, you kind of have to earn your right to go to those other levels and to use those
Yeah.
other tools by focusing on like the basics. And I think stress
Yeah.
management and sleep, both of those are the basics in my opinion. And
100%.
just for
Yeah.
how powerful they are, you know, and if you can
Yeah.
have something like Serenity gummies that will help with stress, or, you know, night caps or the night oil that can help with sleep without becoming something that's like an addiction or something you depend on. That's a big
Yeah.
thing that for me, why I really like cured products, is that it's not something that's really addictive or dependent, or things that people get dependent on. It's more of like a choice. Like, I know that this will help and it's going to help support better sleep and support my stress management, but there's also other things I need to be doing to have to make that happen, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. It's like, I really think that, and this is true in business, but it's just like the whole term simple scales, fancy fails.
Mm-hmm.
Simple scales, fancy fails. And like if we can just keep things simple, then you can actually get results. You honestly, I look back when I was competing, my first business venture that failed was I was actually trying to coach other people. And I was on complicated regimens to get to stage. And then I tried to coach other people on a transformation journey the same way. The success rate was so low because I was focusing on the wrong things. I was making it way too complicated. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's what we try to do at Cured. And, you know, one of the other pieces of this that I didn't really say in the beginning is cannabis specifically, but all the other herbs and mushrooms that are used in our products. There's history of thousands of years of these things being used. Like you look back to ancient pharmacology, and that's when cannabis first showed up. But we ended up in this world where, really, over the last 100 years, we became a result of a propaganda machine. And like that conversation can go really far in a lot of different directions. But when it
Yeah.
comes to cannabis, in the early 1900s, William Randolph Hearst was he was heavily invested in news, and news was printed on paper. And another way to print news was to print it on hemp. But hemp was actually a really big threat to the paper mills. And so back in the early 1900s, this war on hemp started. And then everything in the industry, cannabis, hemp, THC, CBD, anything, like we weren't as nuanced with it as we are now, but everything got put into the same category. And that's when we started coming out with things like reefer madness and a propaganda machine that told everybody that if you're a cannabis user, you're going to find yourself on the couch eating potatoes, eating potato chips, and like jumping out of windows and stuff like that. And like it's just
Or
wrong.
that, just like
And
that flat girl. Or, do you remember
yeah,
that
yeah,
one?
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think that was
yeah,
weed, but it was
yeah.
like
It
again.
was. And then like you and I were products of the DARE program, right? Like where cannabis was considered the same thing as heroin. And it's like, come on, like what are we doing here? But like that's what we're trying to work against. And that takes a lot of work. And the other part of all of it is that I have to be like super careful with my words, but like sometimes stereotypes are true. So
Yeah.
what I mean by that is like you could walk into a dispensary and you could meet a bud tender and he's just blazed out of his mind, and you're going in there because you want support with just overall calming and sleep, but you talk to somebody that's really like interested in just getting high. And
Yeah.
then that kind of ruins the overall experience for somebody that was just looking for an alternative option. Like our world is dying for alternative options, and Cured is that alternative option. But
Yeah.
like we have to educate properly to be that option that people are actually open to. And to do that, like you have to actually change the face of an industry. Because when I say some stereotypes are true, like there are stoners out there. You walk into a dispensary and you're like, it depends on where you're going. You could be quickly turned away from the industry, or you could find yourself coming through the door that is our company and being educated differently. And then looking to people like yourself, looking to people that are well respected in the health and wellness industry and saying, hey, like I'm using something that carried a stigma around it. This is why I'm using it. I'm not using it to get high, but I'm using it to get relief. And when I get this relief, I actually get these results. And different than drinking, I wake up the next day and I'm ready to go. And so,
Yeah.
okay, that's like a data point. And then we take that data point and then we try to look over the course of as many users as possible and say, like, is it possible to produce an alternative option that people are so deeply in need of and want, but sometimes they just can't find because we're censored or there's the propaganda machine. I mean, since the beginning of our company, you look at our analytics on Instagram, this is like the most frustrating thing.
I
We're
bet.
so data driven, and you would understand this because you're very much data driven yourself as a coach. But you look at our Instagram following. Every month, well, actually, every week, I have my marketing team report on all of our numbers. But if you look at our Instagram, we typically get between 5 to 10,000 followers every like 2 to 3 months, but we'll lose about the exact same amount. And that's happened since the very beginning of the company. And so we're censored online all the time. And sometimes we're telling our partners, like, be careful what you're saying so you don't get your Instagram account flagged and stuff like that. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's really frustrating, but it's just the truth. And so, it's a fight worth fighting. That's really like how I like to say it, is like, we're here for the long run, and we just have to change the face to make it inviting to people that could actually truly benefit from the alternative options that we're bringing to the market here at Cured.
Yeah, I love that, and it's so interesting. You said the thing about the dispensaries, because like I partake in outside of cured products as well in terms of
Yeah.
cannabis. So like I'll get in. We've been to dispensaries. Like I went to Seattle a few months ago, and where it's legal recreationally, and so going there, we're just looking for like a chill, just like some pre rolls, right? And the girl there, the bud tender, was that person, totally just like stoner. That's her values in terms of like why people smoke weed, and she probably can't even imagine people just wanting to like smoke half a joint and enjoy a chill evening.
Yeah.
She's saying like, this will get you really fucked up. And it's just like, I think over the years, like some people just kind of stay in that world, and that's cool, to each their own, but then some people do like evolve over time, and so they want that different experience. And you're right, like people really do get scared off from that, and like especially people who are parents of kids, and they want to make sure their kid is safe and things like that. There is that stigma. How would you
Totally.
say it was like your why did you just decide to go into such a difficult pursuit in terms of something that has so much stigma? Not only
Yeah.
like the stigma of cannabis, but like you could have
Yeah.
gone into just like regular ass, like having a dispensary, or you're a
Yeah.
company in that side of things. Yes, there's stigma to that too, but I feel like it's almost harder being where you're at, because you're not selling that, you're selling more health and wellness and longevity. Like, what made you decide to go into that versus something else in either side?
That's a very good question. If I would have known how hard it was going to be, I don't know if I would have done it. Um, Goodness. So, so I started this company after spending 7 years in corporate America. I went to school for aerospace engineering. So I went to school at CU Boulder for aerospace engineering. I graduated. I worked for Lockheed Martin for 7 years. I worked in their NASA division, so more of space exploration versus defense. People think Lockheed Martin, they think defense contractor, but I was more in the space exploration side. And what what I recognize is that as an engineer, people always ask me, do you regret going and getting an engineering degree and then ending up becoming an entrepreneur? Because engineering is not easy. What I realize is that in engineering, it teaches you one very specific thing, and that's problem solving. If you can solve problems, then you can go out and start a business. Um, Cured and building this business has been solving problems every single day since day one, because I can't just run an ad. I can't just like turn on Facebook ads. I have to be careful about what we're saying on Instagram. I have to be careful about everything. I have to be careful about walking into a bank. Like every piece of my business has had some type of loophole to jump through. But what I've realized is that what really set me on this path was just a deep calling. And for me, in college, before I graduated and ended up getting into engineering, I actually found myself in a very dark place. I actually almost ended up taking my life one night in my fourth year of college. I found myself drunk. I was on a bunch of anxiety medications, and I actually blacked out. And one night I had climbed over a guardrail of a bridge, and I was ready to jump off the bridge and end my own life. And it was 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. What somebody was doing underneath that bridge, that the man that stopped me, I now know that it was a godsend, and I actually like truly believe that. But for there to be somebody there 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning underneath a bridge to tell me to stop, and asked me if I could come up. He said, "Hey, stop, don't do this." And I just burst into tears, and he said, "Can I come up there and pull you back over?" And he climbed up the rocks and he pulled me back over the guardrail. And I was in and out of a blackout that whole night. But what happened that night was he actually put his phone number, he took my phone, put my phone number in his phone, and then saved his phone number in my phone. He texted me the next day, and he texted me and he said, "Joe, how's the world today?" And I'll never forget that text message. But what that text message really was a a a gift to realize that we only get this one life. And there's this story. Have you ever seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life?
Yeah.
It's okay.
Used to watch
So
it every single Christmas growing up.
you know that George, the one of the characters in the movie, goes to end his own life by jumping off of a bridge, but there's an angel, Clarence, that stops him and brings him on a tour of the world had George never been born or never been alive. And what I realized is that night, Ben, that was the name of the man underneath the bridge, he was my Clarence. Like he stopped me from jumping off the bridge. And for the longest time, I used to tell this story, and I always used to think, like, I'm just going to stop telling this story. Like, I've told this story so many times, but over the last couple of years, I've started to think about it differently, because I've really started to think about it from Ben's perspective. Like, why was Ben there? It's a Tuesday morning. It was 2:30 a.m. Like, I was drunk. I was on a lot of drugs. I was in the middle of this party life. But what was Ben doing? Like, why was he underneath the bridge? And what I realized is that it's so important to pursue something with your heart and your soul, because you never know what the ripple effect's going to be. And what I realized is that night, Ben was underneath that bridge writing poetry. He was sitting by the river, simply getting inspiration. But Ben made a decision to pursue something that he wanted with his life. He decided to pursue art. He never knew that by deciding to pursue art at 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, when maybe he couldn't sleep or maybe he just needed inspiration, that he was going to end up underneath the bridge and stop somebody from ending their life. And then that person go on to build a company that affects hundreds of thousands of people across the nation. Like, he didn't know the ripple effect that he had in his life by simply pursuing poetry. And for me,
Yeah.
what I've realized is that the reason that I've stepped into this industry, the reason that I continue to wake up every single day and pursue something that's really hard, is that because there's a deep purpose behind it. That night, I ended up getting walked home by my girlfriend. So my girlfriend had caught up to me. Ben had already pulled me over the guardrail, and my girlfriend walked me home, and I took a handful of Xanax. The next day, I woke up and I was under 24-hour surveillance at a hospital because I had tried to end my life. And the next several weeks, I got put on more antidepressants, more medication. And I just became more and more resistant to, like, you aren't even really trying to figure out who I am or what's going on with me. You're just trying to push something that is supposed to be the solution.
That's
And
just a
I've
Band-Aid.
recognized that's just a Band-Aid. And I was so resistant to medication for so long. And I ended up finding a guy named Dr. Andrew Weil, who is one of the first people that was very interested in studying cannabis as a solution for anxiety, as a solution for things that many of us struggle with. And he also is the founder of True Food, which is very focused on an anti-inflammatory diet. He's also very focused on herbalism. And when I found that world that he lived in, I was an aerospace engineer working for Lockheed Martin, doing something that, like, by all credibility of the world, it was like, you're doing what you're supposed to do. You're doing what you should do. Like, you have the job. You're doing something that
American
people go, "Oh,
dream.
that's really cool."
Yeah.
Exactly. But I was so dead inside. And the reason that I decide to wake up and pursue this world and entrepreneurship in this way is because the amount of testimonials that we get, the amount of people that we have reaching out to us, the amount of people saying, like, I've always been interested in this world, in this alternative option, but I've been too scared to tell other people about it because it hasn't been approachable. It hasn't been something that like I felt comfortable sharing with others. What are people going to think about me? It's been over and over and over and over and over. And the world is dying for an alternative option. And so for me, like Ben, I know that there's a deep purpose for me to live out. And I know that there's a lot of people feeling pain. And maybe something as simple as getting a better night's sleep and having a lot less stress in an alternative way could actually have this ripple effect through so many people's life. And I can get to the end of my life and go, yeah, I left, I left working for corporate America and NASA to go pursue cannabis entrepreneurship and have no idea how hard it was going to be, but I could actually feel this tangible effect in other people's lives. And that to me is worth it. Like I've gone through years of not paying myself, having to sell my cars, like the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, all of it. Now while having kids and like it's hard. It's hard every single day, but there's a deep purpose behind it. And so for me, what I've realized is that's one of the most important things in life is to wake up and feel like you have purpose. And that is the thing that keeps me going every single day, even though it's hard. Like, because it is that hard, it makes it just that much more worth it. And long term, I know that this industry is going nowhere. Like, it's not going to just disappear. Actually, if I saw this fact, this data point the other day, alcohol sales in several states in 2024 were down for the first time ever.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, like big alcohol, like that's an industry that just grows and grows and grows and grows. But in Colorado, the first 6 months of 2024, it was down like 6% or something like that. And I'm like, wow, like that to me is just, I want to be more a part of that. And while alcohol almost contributed to ending my life that night, my uncle, my cousin, and my grandpa all died from alcoholism, from throat cancer, from a car crash, from overall just disease. And I almost lost my life to alcohol too. And that story is rampant in our world.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's just like, if not me, then who? Like somebody's got to do this. And there's a lot of people on the same path, right? But like, that's what keeps me going. That's what allows me to go, okay, yeah, it's hard, but it's worth it.
Wow. When you say it's hard, like entrepreneurship, and especially in the industry that you're in, would you say it has gotten easier, or has the hard just changed over time?
It has gotten easier, but the reason it's gotten easier is that I've just Ed Milet says this. He says extremity builds capacity.
Yeah.
And what he means by that is it's like lifting, right? Time under tension is one of like the most important metrics, right? Like the more tension you experience, the more you're actually capable of experiencing in the future. And for me, what's happened is my capacity has expanded a lot. It's every level, it gets harder and harder. Like you deal with bigger problems. Like I was going through a business deal last year and I had these two bounds. I was like, this is going to be a $50 million deal, or this is going to be, I'm going to lose $300,000. And I ended up losing $275,000. So I was like, okay, well, I didn't get the upper bound. I almost got the lower bound, but it's going to end up somewhere in between. And so for me, like, it's just that every level requires like a new version of myself, and I've become more capable. The problems have become much more difficult. The problems have become bigger. They've become easier to move through because my capacity has expanded a lot. In our third month of business, we had $30,000 stolen from us. And like, I didn't sleep for 3 days. And when we went through this almost $300,000 loss last year, I was like, well, okay, we'll wake up tomorrow and like, we'll keep going.
We'll
But
figure it out.
it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Right. So, I've just gotten a lot better. And I think you would probably agree with this too, is as an entrepreneur, you just really have to, like we were saying earlier, this whole idea of your health and fitness journey, you have to focus on the things that actually produce the results. And that is entrepreneurship. You could throw 15 things at the wall and not know what's going to stick, and you could continue to operate like that. or you could do it a couple times, see what sticks, and then just focus on what sticks and just keep doing that over and over and over again. And that comes back to data and understanding your numbers and really knowing, like, what's our mission? Why are we here? What are we here to do? And what really moves the needle? And sometimes that makes you pivot as an entrepreneur. Like, I was so resistant to releasing gummies like for years. I was like, no, we're not doing gummies. Like,
Why?
and we're not doing that. Because I was just like, I think there's a lot of people that aren't doing it right. And like, they're not healthy. And so like you're looking for something that's supporting your health, and then like you're getting all the dyes and you're getting all the like these nasty ingredients. And so we took years to develop ours, but like I didn't think we were going to end up where we did. And we
Now it's your
did
best
because we
selling
just had
product,
now it's our best
right?
selling product, literally. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a good question. I mean, I think the entrepreneurial journey is it's all about that. It's about capacity and understanding that your capacity expands. And I love, I'll quote Ed Milet again because I just really love him and he's been a mentor of mine. But because you feel like you're on a roller coaster as an entrepreneur means that you're going in the right direction. It means that you chose that life. He says most people live their life go on a merry-go-round, like up and down a little bit, going around and around and around, seeing the exact same thing. But you, the entrepreneur, you chose the roller coaster. And because it feels like you're on this crazy journey of like, oh, we're going to win, we can't be stopped, to like, I don't know if we're going to make it through tomorrow. That is the signal that like you're on the right path. And so I think it's a lot of framing and perspective, but then just also understanding that like you have to just continue to build your capacity. And there's no better analogy for that than bodybuilding and weightlifting. Like that's literally what it
Yeah,
is.
I agree. And I think with both bodybuilding and entrepreneurship, like we can be met with these really hard moments, like, $1 million versus losing 3,000 or $300,000 type of moment. Or, in bodybuilding, going for a big goal and, risking losing it, like spending all this money going to nationals only to,
Yeah.
miss your pro card by 1 point or 2 points or something like that. But I truly believe that every challenge that we're given in life and in bodybuilding and whatever is like we wouldn't be given the challenge if we weren't ready for it. Whatever
Yeah.
anyone believes in, like you're being given that challenge as a test. Like, can you handle this? I think you're ready to handle this. And I think that's true for both, is just like you have to, it's sink or swim, but like for the most part you're still going to wake up in the next day. You're still going to be able to make a choice on what to do next. And you could
Mhm.
totally give up. You could say, you know what, none of this is really worth it. But you've come this far, so you might as well like go a little farther and see what's on the other side of that challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. You nailed it. Because I think a lot of us, I don't know about for you, but when you became an entrepreneur, like the worst case scenario we think is death. We're like, oh, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to die, or my bank account's going to hit zero and then I'm going to die. And you're like,
Yeah.
well, shit, like that's really bad, but like it's
Yeah.
not that bad. And like
Really.
you don't know that until you actually do it. But
Yeah.
for anybody that's trying to make big decisions in their life, like that's how I always frame it, is like, what's the best possible case scenario? Like, what's your ideal outcome? And then what's the worst case scenario? Like when I became an entrepreneur, like the best possible case scenario was, well, I guess where I am now. But the worst possible case scenario was I quit my engineering job. I had 2 months worth of savings in my bank account, and I had to end up back home at my parents' house. Like that literally was the worst case scenario for me. And so I'm fortunate enough to say, hey, I could like move back into my parents' house. Well, guess what? When I lost $30,000 in the third month of business, do you want to know where I ended up? Back in my parents' house. But I kept going, and I just
Yeah.
kept going and going and going. And so it's kind of just like, it's important to have that frame of ideal outcome and worst case scenario, and then know that you're going to end up somewhere in between, and maybe you even bounce between the two, because that's what I did. Like I went to that worst, what I thought was the worst case scenario, and I was okay. I just kept building the business and I kept
Realized it
going,
wasn't
and
that
then
bad.
and I realized it wasn't that bad. Like, you know, the entrepreneur journey is there a couch you can sleep on? Somebody. Do you have a friend that you could like, they would take you in, you could sleep on their couch? Okay, that is the worst case scenario. That is literally the worst case scenario. Okay, so are you okay with that? And if you're okay with that, like it might suck, like you might be embarrassed, of course, but like you could handle it. And so, yeah, it's you when you say this the sink or swim mentality, the thing that was a forcing function for me was I went from working in corporate America for a federally funded company to becoming a cannabis entrepreneur. So I wasn't going to go back and work for the government. Like that just couldn't happen. Maybe you can like create that in your own life if you're listening to this, but like,
But that puts the pressure on you too to like,
yeah,
I got to make this work no matter what. And now even more so, like you have the one kid, or did you just have the second?
two. Yeah, we have two.
Two. Okay.
Yeah.
Like now you have kids, and that's like a whole other level of pressure too. And even if someone didn't have kids, like having a partner, having a mortgage, whatever they have, like you can look at what you've built up to this point and what is at stake, and just know like, well, I have to work as hard as I can to keep it all afloat.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. And
not
that's
just a
not,
hobby.
no, and it's not like, that's not reckless, right? That's like creating your own forcing function.
Mm-hmm.
Even just, hey, I want to transform my life physically. Okay, I'm going to work with this coach. It feels a little uncomfortable to invest whatever it is. But guess what? Like that $1,000 or whatever it is you invest, that's a vote for your future self. It's like, yeah, I actually believe that I can change. So I'm going to spend money to get uncomfortable to create that forcing function. But if you keep going back to comfort, you keep ending up on the same exact view on the Ferris wheel or the merry. Did I say Ferris wheel earlier? I meant merry-go-round. What
You
merry-go-round?
said
Whatever I said.
merry-go-round
But
earlier.
like you end up back in that same spot, right? But like if you have the forcing function, then you actually like it's like it that is I think that's what I've realized is I always just try to find those times in which I can create the forcing function. I can create the sink or swim. Like Andy Frisella says, zero options mentality. It's like there is no other option. And I
Yeah.
think it's like a hack. It's like, okay, if I can create no other option, then I actually have to just execute. And it's all on me. It's all my responsibility.
Well, and that actually, like, people are afraid of that because they think only of that worst case scenario, and they wonder if I can even do that. But really, like, if you have the mentality that there's no other options, then guess what? Like, your survival instincts will kick in, and you will find another option, even if it's not the option you that's glamorous or sexy or makes you more money. It's still the next step, and it still moves you forward, and you can still learn from it. And that's a big thing
Mm-hmm.
that has come about for me is like the worst case scenario might happen, but at least I'm going to learn from it. So I can see it, view it, look at it, take it in, say like, all right, I fucked this up. I'm going to do better next time. Or, oh, wow, this works better than I thought I did. And that's been a big thing for me this year is just like all of those moments where I pushed myself past my comfort zone, it ended up putting me in a better spot than I ever imagined. And so, what if I
Mm-hmm.
kept doing that and took bigger risks and made scarier decisions and just see how those compound together?
Yeah, 100%. And I imagine as you work with people, there's a huge mindset component to it. Like it's probably mostly mindset.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of skill in the back end of like why are we eating this much? Why are we training this much? Like there is a lot of data that goes into that, but there's also just like this mindset component of all of it that
Mm-hmm.
is like the catalyst. And when you talk about those upper and lower bounds of like what's the worst case scenario and what's the best case scenario, like you have to look at both, but then you have to be super clear on which you're continuing to focus on because you actually do manifest what you focus on. You move closer to what you focus on. And so, like, yeah, you can identify the worst case scenario, but quit like thinking that that's the outcome and quit focusing on it. Just know that it's there and then focus on what it is you actually really want to achieve. And when you get extremely specific and extremely detailed, like I'm going to brag for 1 second. Over the last couple of months, I was 1.2% off our revenue projections. Like I projected it and I was 1.2% off. And when you're doing millions of dollars in revenue, that's like only a couple $1,000.
Huge. Yeah.
And but that's because we're focused on it. We're focused on that number. Like that number is the target. So how do we get to that number? And in your life, what I've realized is that you have to get super clear on the outcome. And then you have to be flexible in knowing that what you believe to be the ultimate path to get you to that outcome may not be the path that you end up taking. If you stay focused on the ultimate outcome, but you stay flexible to choose the alternative path when it presents itself, then you'll always get to the ultimate outcome. Because, like, here's the thing: how do we get to where we want to go? Well, we need to know where we're going. Like, we go to a new city and you're like, okay, I'm in LA. I need to go to Erewhon and get a $50 lunch, whatever it is. It's probably like $70, something stupid. But you put in Erewhon, like you look at the destination, you put that into your phone, and then your phone tells you how to get there. And if you get stuck, then your phone gives you an alternative option, alternative route. But you only can take that alternative route because you knew where you were going in the first place. And that is life. And what I've realized is in the beginning of entrepreneurship, when I like had these times where I was like, I'm definitely not going to make it through, I was just so tied to like what I thought the path had to be being the path. And I wasn't flexible. Like I wouldn't listen to mentors. I wouldn't listen to the little pings that were telling me like, hey, you should go this way, not that way to get to your ultimate outcome. And yeah, you just have to be like, you have to be focused on the outcome you want and removing the noise when it's presenting itself. And then at the same time, being honest with when the path you're taking is not the path that's going to get you to where you want to go becomes true. Because when that happens, then you just have to be able to pivot and you have to be okay. Like you could spend years building a product, you could spend years building a business, you could spend years building a partnership, a relationship, a marriage, whatever it is. But like when you get the sign that this is not the path that's going to get you to where you want to go, you have to be open to listening to it. And that for me has been one of the biggest lessons because I was so just like white knuckling, controlling in the beginning of entrepreneurship. And I wasn't open to like an alternative path. I wasn't open to being like, well, if I'm not controlling it, like, how are we going to get there?
Well, yeah, that closed offness, that obsession almost with controlling the exact path and knowing exactly where everything is going to go and how it's going to go and who's going to be there and just like every little detail. If you like, how silly is it to think that we can control that much when it comes to getting from point A to point B when there's so many things that could possibly get in our way? Because you're not alone in that path no matter what. Even with bodybuilding is a selfish sport, they say it's like it's very individual, but think about how many other people are going to affect your journey to get to the stage: your partner, your parents, your social circle, your coach, yourself and your own inner voice and your own identity, your kids if you have kids. So many different things affect that. Same thing with entrepreneurship, with any goal that you have. So why would you ever think that you can control everything and you're going to have the exact path that you assume and that you predict, for especially for long-term goals that take 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever? Like
Yeah.
life just don't work like that. And so
No.
one thing that I've found it, and like I hear it a lot from Layla and Alex Hormozy, is instead of thinking about all of the things that you need to have in place for you to reach a goal, you have to think about what you're willing to give up and in order to reach that goal. Because most of the time when we want to change our lives and make a big transformation in our finances, our relationships, health, wellness, fitness, it's not as much about like what we need to do more of. It's usually more about like what we need to do less of. Like I need to drink less alcohol if I want to have control over how my body feels and performs. And so it's not about like necessarily adding a supplement or adding a hangover cure. It's about taking away the alcohol and,
Yeah.
or at least moderating it. And then seeing, like studying those results and see like, oh, I feel so much better because I'm not drinking alcohol. Now, now I can think about like what I could do instead to take the edge off or to relax. And I found in taking things away and paring down, you just learn so much more about yourself and what you really need in order to thrive.
100%. 100%. You know, so there's a difference between being busy and being effective. And I think a lot of us, this was so me. Like I was so busy for most of my life. Just like going, 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 going. Like, what am I doing? Like, I'm not making progress. When I was in engineering, when I was working for Lockheed Martin, I was also pursuing a master's degree. I was trying to start multiple businesses at the same time, and I was bodybuilding. So I was like, I was competing. I was working a full-time job. I was trying to get my master's, starting my master's. I was in a relationship. I was trying to start 3 businesses. And when I look back on that time, there was like this time of my life for like 3 years where nothing was progressing, but I was doing more than I had ever done before. And I was just extremely busy. And I think that that's where that's where I got trapped. I don't want to speak for other people, but I got trapped in that. I'm like, I'm adding in all the things. Like I'm doing all the things. I'm doing more things. I'm just adding in more things, but I'm not getting results. And so I couldn't agree with you more. It's always just this constant refining. Like this year, we're continuing to grow every single year, and we'll have our best year ever in 2025. We had our best year ever in 2024, and we're just going to keep doing that. But we're actually focusing on the least amount of things we've ever focused on.
Yeah, you guys
So
actually took
back to your
product
question.
off, right?
Yeah.
You took
I mean, we used to
off your
have
site.
like
You used to have
20
a lot.
products.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And like every time we get rid of a product, it's like, like we worked so hard on creating that product. Like we had drinks, ready to drink beverages that we worked
Yeah, I remember.
years on. I signed a freaking lease on this big building to basically store all of the pallets of drinks that I'm still paying for right now, but we got rid of the drink 2 years ago. I made a lot of decisions to get that product to market, but like the data didn't show that that was the right product, and people said they loved that product, but like we just kept getting more and more focused. Like it's the whole idea of just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it, and like you just always have to recognize that the first thing to do to make progress in your life is to remove from, like take away, get down to the bare bones of what it is you really want, and then build the proper foundation. Because this whole idea of being busy, like if you don't have the proper foundation, like getting back to the simple things that we were talking about, maybe it's sleep, I don't know what it is for you, but like if you don't have the proper foundation, you can build this life on like this scaffolding that's missing a complete leg. And this life gets however big it is, and it's very easy for it to come crumbling down because you didn't build the right foundation. And that's true in business, that's true in health and wellness, that's true in bodybuilding, that's true in everything. Like if you don't build the right foundation, you could probably make some progress for a while. But like as soon as you have enough tension, or as soon as you have enough weight on this like infrastructure that is your life, it's going to come crumbling down unless you've built the proper foundation. And the only way to build the proper foundation is not like you're playing Django and you're trying to like pull things out and like rebuild the foundation. Like you have to just start with a really strong foundation and then build. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us are afraid of things of like starting over, like, you know, burning the proverbial boats or like going back to the basics. But for me, that has been the thing that's allowed me to build a relationship, a marriage, a family, a business. It's just I'm focusing on a lot less than I've ever focused on in my life before. Maybe from the outside, it looks like I have more and more responsibility, which I definitely do. But I'm not just trying to do all of these things because I can. I'm focusing on only the things that move the needle in my life, and like very simple 4 pillars. Like I love a vision board. I love a vision board. I love manifesting. I love getting super clear on what it is I want. Every year when I start to look at the year, it becomes more and more simple because I just get frustrated with myself when I put too many things on my vision and my plan. And then we get down the path and like we start to resent ourselves because like I didn't follow through that. I didn't follow through that. I didn't follow through on. But it was only because I put too much on my plate. Only because I tried to focus on too many things at once. And yeah, I don't know. I could ramble about this forever, but what I've really realized is that entrepreneurship, health and wellness, it's way more simple than we actually make it out to be. Sometimes you just have to go through it on your own to figure that out. I think that that's the hard part, because that was true for me. I could listen to all the things, but then I had to like crash and burn myself to actually go, okay, well, my mentor was right. Okay, that person was right. That person was right. It's like, your parents, the you'll know when you're older thing. Oh my God.
Yeah, we know now.
Wait till you have kids. I'm like, shit. Yeah. Like you're right in every aspect. Like, got it now, but I couldn't see it when I was 15 and like a knucklehead.
Yeah. What do you see as something like, I don't know if you are kind of in a mentor role for anybody. I know that you've had mentors yourself, and obviously like you talk about parents too and the lessons they give. What are some things that you've like imparted on people that you've seen people actually take on and learn through getting that mentorship versus learning the hard way?
Yeah, I've had masterminds and I've coached other entrepreneurs, and my wife has done that with me as well. But I'm thinking about this one specific example of a friend that I had mentored, and he's really just become a friend. But he texted me recently and he said, what was the thing that finally allowed you to get over your depression? And for me, like what I realized is that, similar to what we were talking about earlier, that we live in stories or we live in narratives. Like we all live in stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, that we tell ourselves about the world, and that we tell ourselves that other people tell about us. So like we live in this story that we've constructed, that we think other people think of us, and then the world has told us, and then like this story and perception and frame that we've created for ourselves that allows us to navigate the world. And I just had so much hatred for myself for most of my life. And what I've realized is that for me, one of the biggest things was getting clear on why I hated myself. A lot of us, like when we look back at our childhood experiences, as you become a parent, you really realize that your parents were doing like the best they possibly could, but you don't realize that until you're later down the road. And for me, what I told my friend was this is for like the high performer. This is for the person that feels like they can never do enough to be anything, to be good, to be loved, to be worthy. If that is you, one of the most transformative things for me was recognizing that I needed to forgive myself. When my therapist said, what would life look like if you actually forgave yourself? My initial answer was, I'm going to lose my edge, because if I hate myself enough, like I can just like drive through anything. And like I knew that for a while, but the thing that finally changed everything, and this is part of the 12-step program, I've realized a lot of things in my life have come from like things that are similar to like addiction recovery, but making amends in your life, making amends with your past, making amends with people from your past, that thing, if you are the high performer and you feel like you can't forgive yourself, you have to go get forgiveness from people in your past to recognize that you can actually forgive yourself. Because for a while for me, I was like, oh yeah, I got it. Like I just need to forgive myself. And I could like intellectualize that, but I couldn't actually feel that in my body until I started to make amends with people in my past. And I was able to see them in person, say sorry, give them a hug, and then go, oh, like they don't think anything bad of me. Like they're okay with me. Like we don't hate each other. We're all humans just trying to figure it out. And like I was able to actually start forgiving myself when I got forgiveness and actually felt it from others. I intellectualized it for so long. And so I think for me, as an entrepreneur, you have to get not as an entrepreneur, just as a human, you have to get super clear on the story that drives your life. Like, what is the narrative that you live in? And how does that play out in every aspect of your life? Like, if you are super driven, but you feel like you can never get to enough, it's because somewhere in your past, something happened where you created a story about yourself that, like, you will never be enough. You can never prove that you're enough. People can't trust you, whatever it is. But for
You're
me,
living in that. Yeah, I 100% agree.
100%, 100%. And so, like, we can get familiar with that story, but until we actually understand how that story played out in every aspect of our life and then change it, then you can't actually, like, be a different person. To get different results, you have to be a different person. For me to be a different person, I had to actually forgive myself for a lot of things I hated myself for, but I had to experience forgiveness from others to then go,
Yeah.
okay, that's what that actually means. And so, yeah, when I mentor other people, it's a lot of just getting extremely clear on the story that operates your life. What is the story that operates your life, and how does that play out? How does that play out in every relationship? How does that play out in every decision? How does that play out in the story that you're continuing to just, like, drive yourself through unconsciously? Like, when you lash out, when things fall apart, what was it that made you believe that that thing couldn't work? What was it that made you that believe that that relationship couldn't work, or you couldn't be in a relationship with that person, or your parents could never love you, or nobody can ever love you? Like, why is that true? And until you, like, you actually get clear on that and you work through it, no amount of success will ever make you happy. No amount of anything will ever make you happy.
Well, and you
And
have a
I
lineage
had
to
to
that success that you can
100%,
create.
100%. Like, back to Ed, he always says that the quality of your life is equal to the quality of your emotions. But if you're
Mhm.
stuck in shame, you're stuck in guilt, you're stuck in those lower vibration emotions, you're just going to find those every single day. But if you're stuck in gratitude, in joy, in love, in bliss, then, like, manifestation actually works. Then, like, you can actually have mantras and be super clear, and that actually become a thing, not just like you're saying it to say it, which, like, is never going to get you anywhere, but you're saying it because you believe it. You're saying it because you know it to be true. Like, this year when I was writing out 2025, it's I will, I am this, not like I'm going to try to, or I think I can, or maybe, or I hope, or any of those things. Like, once you get clear on the story that drives your life, then you get clear on the language that you speak, then you get clear on the beliefs that you have about yourself, then you get super clear on your identity. And when you get clear on your identity, then you can actually create whatever it is you want in your life. But
Mm-hmm.
it takes a little while to do that. And, like, maybe things have to
Well, it
crash
takes
and burn,
making a
which they
lot of
did for me.
mistakes. For me, I know
Literally.
that it's taken a lot of mistakes, and I had like a whole marriage that I ended up leaving at, like, back in 2020, and that was, I wouldn't say like that is the reason that I am who I am today, but it's like a big part of just like my own finding of my identity, is because I realized upon leaving that like that was a mistake for many reasons, but it was a mistake I needed to make in order to get to where I'm at now, where I feel like the most in touch with myself. And I think
Yeah.
going back to your thing about forgiveness is like, yes, I think if we can get that forgiveness from other people in our past or in our present, then that can help us forgive ourselves. But it's also just about like, even if, say, you can't gain that forgiveness from someone, you have to think about like just taking more responsibility. And that's been a big one for me, is just taking responsibility for my faults, for my mistakes, for my part in things, and allowing myself to improve on that, not just hate myself more for the things that I'm
Mm,
taking responsibility for. And
mm,
that, like, that's been what has helped me become a better coach. That then becoming a better coach helped me realize like, oh, I could do this on my own, and I could build this for myself and now for other coaches, and just like keep leveling up. And the I think a lot of people think that anyone at this really successful place that they're putting on a pedestal, it's that like they have it all figured out. but really nobody does. Like going back to what you said about your parents, like we thought as kids that our parents were just like these people that have things figured out, and that's why they're parents and they just know everything. But now we're the age that our parents were when we were kids, and we're like, they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. Like they were in their 20s and 30s. Like,
Yep.
no, they did not know. And
yeah, isn't
yeah.
responsibility freeing? Like
Mm-hmm.
responsibility is the most
Yeah.
freeing thing there ever was. It's not
Mm-hmm.
guilt. Like you're not guilty.
Yeah.
It may not be your fault, but you're responsible.
Yeah.
And like
It's just
that
being
is so
real
freeing.
about where you're at.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah. I used to make this really complicated. Now I'm trying to
It doesn't have
simplify
to be
it.
that way. Yeah.
No.
So, last thing I'll ask is, what are you most excited for in 2025 for Cured? I know there's some fun things in the future that I know about, but what are you
Yeah.
specifically most excited for?
Yeah, we're releasing a product here in this month. I'll just say this month, later in the month. And I'm really excited about that. I'm most excited about just continuing to build my team. I've realized that for me, I get the greatest joy out of seeing other people become who it is they can be, but I take responsibility for being part of that. In that, if I'm not helping my team members grow, then I'm kind of doing this. Like I'm just kind of holding on to everything. But if I can empower my team members to grow and become who it is they can become, then not only does my business grow, but like I see other people grow and they look back on this time in their life and they look at it as a really impactful chapter of their life. Like we got an email recently from one of our old employees and she goes, I realized that Cured is very different than other employers. And she didn't say anything besides that, but I took it as a massive compliment because she like reached back out. She knew she could get a reference from me. I actually had let her go. So like we still have a relationship, but I had let her go. And like that to me is like, that actually means a lot that you can like allow people to go on their own path, but still have like love and
Respect.
appreciation for each
Yeah.
other and respect for each other. So for me, I'm 100% focused on that. I named my year Breakthrough. 2025 is Breakthrough. And what I mean by that is like there are limits that we all put on ourselves. Like there's this idea of like this glass ceiling like I can only do this much or I can only be this great or I can only like accomplish this much. But for me, I'm focused on breaking through all of those glass ceilings for myself and everybody as a team within the walls of Cured. And so I'm just really focused on leadership development and developing my team. And that to me will create breakthrough. So simple breakthrough.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah, I had everyone on my team kind of decide, my team meaning like my team of clients, decide on a word for the year. And it actually wasn't even me that asked it. I think I had a client that I had talked to specifically about a word for the year just to help her stay focused. And she shared it in the group. And then like every one of my clients went off on like, oh, well, this is my word and this is going to be my word. And it was just going back to that leadership thing. It's cool to see people really start to get what you're giving them. And sometimes it takes a few
100%.
months, sometimes it takes years, but it's powerful because you're changing lives. So.
Yeah. And that simplicity, because if you create a word as your focus, it's the word, like just stay focused on that. And that's keeping things simple. Yeah. So I appreciate that a lot.
Well, I appreciate you for taking the time to be on the podcast. Super excited about the new product coming on. This will release next week. So
perfect.
Everyone stay tuned. Follow Cured Nutrition to see what's going on with that. Follow me. I'll be talking about it on my networks and whatnot. But thank you, Joe, for being on the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm excited about this one.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for being a part of Cured, and just thank you for doing what you're doing in the world. Takes all of us.
Yeah, it does. Bye.
See ya.